I mean, take the car key out of your ear, for goodness sakes. Like,
I don't know,
this has
Scott.
literally been his position since he was like 30 years old when the regime took over. So I don't know what they've been listening to until now, other than this. They wanted always to try to get him to bend to their will. And what they don't understand about Trump is that people bend to his. He's the head of the party and he runs the country, not the podcaster.
Except that he literally ran on the line, I will end all foreign wars, and mocked Jeb Bush, by the way, for being related to George W. Bush. And
Tara Palmieri faces off with Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as tensions grow around a rising MAGA backlash, Donald Trump's approach to the Iran conflict, and increasing frustration within his own supporters. And while Scott Jennings attempts to defend the situation, Tara Palmieri pushes back firmly, highlighting the clear difference between Trump's earlier anti-war stance and the current escalation that is now splitting his base, as the discussion also turns to strong criticism from major MAGA voices, ongoing questions about leadership, and deep concerns over a lack of clear direction and mixed messaging, while the situation continues to develop. So let's get into it and see how Tara Palmieri takes down Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Now, by no means am I suggesting that any of these people are authorities on much, but these are Trump's people. These are the people that Trump used to get elected the first time and the second time. And so the turnaround here is really stark, Scott.
Well, look, they're isolationists, and he's not. He never has been. There's been a lot of people in that wing of our politics that wanted to ascribe or attach their views to him. He just never has been. He wasn't in his first term. He hasn't been in his second term. He's been a hawk on Iran his entire adult life. And I see some of these people now saying, gee whiz, we had no idea Donald Trump hated Iran and thought they shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. I mean, take the car key out of your ear, for goodness sakes. Like, this has literally been his position since he was like 30 years old when the regime took over. So I don't know what they've been listening to until now, other than this. They wanted always to try to get him to bend to their will. And what they don't understand about Trump is that people bend to his. He's the head of the party and he runs the country, not the podcaster.
Except that he literally ran on the line, I will end all foreign wars, and mocked Jeb Bush, by the way, for being related to George W. Bush and supporting the war.
I'm glad that you're saying it.
Did he not
Sorry,
also
I just
run
had
preventing Iran
for
from getting
a
a nuclear weapon?
change.
Did he not say it time and again?
I don't know how many times we need to pull the receipts of Trump arguing that Democrats would take us into war with Iran, Trump arguing that we've spent too much time on regime change in the Middle East. They're not saying this because they made it up out of thin air. They're saying it because Trump ran on it.
Yes.
And
no,
sorry.
Go ahead. You can finish
I
your
was
point.
just going to say that, like, what should worry Scott is that the lines that President Trump uses, his base are now using against him, which shows that there is uncertainty right now in the core of his base. The people who actually feed on the media diet of Tucker Carlson and maybe some Alex Jones, like, these are the people and
let me just ask you a question. Are you suggesting that the elected president of the United States should run American foreign policy and national security based on the daily podcast rantings of Alex Jones?
He already runs it based on Fox News.
That's crazy.
Everything he reads.
He has to run it based on the circumstances.
But why
the
not
circumstances are, I'm not going to let these fanatics get a nuclear weapon.
Why not actually listen to the American people? Only one in four Americans actually supports this war. 1 in 4 Republicans actually supports this war.
That's false. Republicans
So
support the president.
just to note
Republicans support the
despite
president.
what Trump
They
said
support the president.
in that New York Post interview about Tucker Carlson, according to the New York Times, he did speak with Carlson just a couple of weeks ago before this war began and tried to convince Carlson that it would be okay, he says, because it always is. So they're still communicating. He hasn't disowned these folks. He's still trying to convince them to come over to his side on this war.
What becomes obvious right away is the gap between what is said in political messaging and what actually happens in policy once tensions rise. Because over the years, we have seen that candidates who campaign on pulling back from foreign involvement but later shift toward military action often face criticism from their own supporters. And the same kind of pattern appeared during earlier Middle East conflicts, when public support started to fall as soon as expectations no longer matched reality, which is important because credibility goes beyond image and directly shapes how voters, allies, and even rivals understand every move, especially when the message begins to change halfway through. And another major point here is public opinion, which has more influence than many realize, as recent polling continues to show that support for long-term military engagement remains limited even among core voter groups. And when only a small share of the public supports a conflict, it creates pressure that can quietly affect decisions behind the scenes. And history also shows that when wars lose support early, they become harder to continue, both politically and economically. And that is when divisions start to appear, not just between parties, but inside them as well, which is what seems to be happening right now. And on top of that, there is the bigger issue of how modern conflicts are presented, because handling foreign policy through public statements or social media creates a very different situation compared to traditional diplomacy, often mixing up strategy with messaging and making consistency harder to maintain. And in high-risk moments, this kind of approach can create uncertainty not only for the public, but also for international partners who depend on clear direction. And without that steady consistency, even strong positions can start to feel reactive instead of well-planned.
Look, again, Donald Trump has prosecuted this war by way of Truth Social posts, okay? So to sit here and say that he doesn't take the word of the podcast bros or anything like that is asinine, because we all know that he doesn't read. He doesn't read his presidential daily briefings. He calls in people and rules by committee and asks, random folks when he's dining in Mar-a-Lago what he should do on foreign policy. I mean, this is not exactly an example of someone who is stable, who is focused, who actually has strategy. So, and it's clear by what we're seeing. And the American people, including his MAGA base, is looking at this going, this is not what we voted for. They feel betrayed by him. MAGA has been betrayed by Donald Trump, and they're waking up and seeing that. Tara talks about
Tara, tell us a little bit
quickly
about your piece.
So
you talked to family members who are Trump supporters.
Right. So over Christmas, my family, they are core MAGA supporters. They are not swing voters. They believe Trump. It is part of their identity, okay? When I saw them over Easter, 4 months later, all they could talk about was how they were betrayed. They were betrayed. They did not want to go into a war where there was no endgame. They were fearful that there would be a draft, that their children would be drafted one day. They saw Afghanistan, or they looked back at Iraq. They thought, this is not what we signed up for. It's more expensive, inflation. None of the things that they thought that President Trump was going to do were actually happening. And there was uncertainty. Things don't add up. That is what they kept saying. And they started asking me questions. And believe me, I'm a black sheep in the family, okay?
Congressman, if you run 40 seconds.
No, I was just going to say one thing that the craziest pointed out that I think is right is domestic stuff. And there's been a lot less focus on, people are struggling with high costs. They're getting crushed right now. The tariffs, now the gas prices, rent, energy prices, and that is not part of the conversation, and that's got to be part of the conversation. I think that's been lost, and I think it's one of the things pissing everyone off on his base.
Well, it's been overshadowed, too.
Well, also because the numbers show it. We have a record number of veteran foreclosures because Trump has cut what's gone on at the VA. We have record numbers of bankruptcies for farmers because Trump has betrayed them. We have less jobs created under Donald Trump than we did under Joe Biden, that he's betrayed our blue-collar workers. So it's reflected in the polls, Scott, and I don't think you're telling the American people they're stupid for what they're feeling, are you?
We got to leave it there, everyone.
Right at the start, what stands out is how strongly this situation mirrors a deeper pattern we have seen before. Because when leadership messaging and real policy begin to move in different directions, public trust drops quickly, and history shows that wars that start without a clear end goal often lose support fast, especially when people feel they were not fully told what to expect, which is exactly what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, where early support faded as costs, timelines, and objectives became unclear. And once voters feel that reality does not match what they were promised, frustration begins to grow across all sides. And another major factor here is the economic pressure, quietly adding to that frustration. Because this is not only about foreign policy, as people are dealing with rising fuel prices, higher food costs, and ongoing housing pressure at the same time. And when instability affects regions linked to global energy supply, like the Strait of Hormuz, those effects show up almost immediately in everyday expenses. And on top of that, industries such as agriculture and transportation are especially sensitive to these changes, which is why financial strain is becoming more visible in those sectors. And that link between global conflict and local cost of living is something people are feeling in real time. And beyond that, there's the wider issue of how decisions are being made and shared, because in high-pressure situations, consistency and clear structure matter a lot for maintaining confidence, both at home and abroad. And when messaging starts to look reactive or scattered, it creates uncertainty, not only for the public, but also for allies trying to stay aligned. And over time, this kind of unpredictability can weaken coordination and make long-term outcomes harder to achieve, even if short-term goals are reached.
The types of air dominance that we have. I mean, the planes are able to fly largely over the airspace at certain altitudes, but as was demonstrated on Friday, at lower altitudes, pretty more basic weapons can down a plane, which is what happened. I should read, this is the Pentagon spokesperson, Sean Parnell. He says that scrutiny of Hegseth's public messaging is lies and propaganda. He says Hegseth has provided the commander-in-chief with decisive military options to achieve our clear, scoped objectives. He says the Washington Post is pushing a fake news story. Not surprising, but what do you make of Hegseth's public and private performance?
I think he is completely off message every time he's speaking. I mean, anyone can tell that Iran still has the ability to shoot down our weapons. They're able to shoot down our fighter pilots. I mean, this is not a country that has been obliterated, like the president said this summer. We can't really trust anything he says, and I think really can't trust anything the president says either. And that's why so many people, their faith in the administration, it's completely lost, including among the president's, closest allies, like you've seen in the podcast sphere, and really across his base now. People just don't know who to believe anymore. And when you can't trust anyone, I mean, you turn to conspiracy.
Do you trust General Kane? He says we've destroyed like 13,000 military targets. You think that's a lie?
I'm not sure, because
the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kane.
We have gotten so much
not sure
disinformation.
This is a career military officer, a man of high honor and high. What do you think? I mean, you sit in on the briefings. Can we not trust what General Kane is telling us about the military devastation we have wrought on these terrorists?
We've got the best men and women serving us, and the best generals and best intel day to day. Those who work, these are career who do an incredible job. I think part of the frustration I think that you're getting at as a member of Congress and someone who sits on the Intelligence Committee, I will tell you, we have not been getting the briefings that we should be getting. They have not briefed they haven't come and testified before any of the committees about the conflict. It's very difficult to get this information out, and he hasn't laid out to the president hasn't laid out to the country in a clear way and or to the Congress of what are the objectives, how do we know what a win looks like. And I think you were laying out a lot of the things of what we hope to have accomplished or hope to accomplish in the future, and then I know that I want to make sure we've gotten done diminishment on the missiles, on the drone program, on the terror program, on their nuclear program, right? Those are all key objectives. We're just not getting the information that we need to be making some of these calls and to know really what to believe and what not to believe, and that's the frustration.
Also worth noting, the CNN just reported this week that Iran still maintains a lot of its ballistic missile capabilities, its drone capabilities, despite all of that devastation of those 13,000 targets. And then the New York Times had a deep piece today about, based on Maggie Haberman and John Swan's book, about how Trump got into this war, based on a briefing from Benjamin Netanyahu that made it sound like this would be easy.
At the start, what really stands out is the clear gap between how this situation is being explained publicly and how modern warfare actually works in reality. because even though air dominance gives a strong edge, it does not guarantee full control over the ground or in contested zones. And in recent conflicts, we have seen that even weaker forces can quickly adapt by using low-cost drones, mobile missile systems, and layered defenses that still create serious risks. So when aircraft are still exposed at certain altitudes, it shows the battlefield is much more complicated than simple claims of control suggest. And another major issue here is the limited transparency and lack of steady oversight, because in earlier operations, Congress and intelligence committees were kept regularly informed to ensure accountability and clear understanding of objectives. But when those briefings become restricted or unclear, it opens the door for speculation and growing distrust. And this is not just about politics, as it directly shapes how the public views the situation. Because once confidence in official messaging starts to weaken, even accurate updates can be doubted, which only increases confusion. And looking at the bigger picture, the main concern is the absence of clearly defined strategic goals. Since striking a large number of targets may sound impactful, but if key systems like missiles and drone programs remain active, then the threat has not truly been removed and has simply shifted form. And history shows that early gains in war do not always lead to lasting stability. So without clear benchmarks for success, it becomes difficult to judge real progress, and much easier for the conflict to continue without a clear resolution.